Hello and welcome, listeners, to Mindful Living Podcast with your host, Sana. Today, we are diving into the world of high achieving women, burnout, and balance. But not the kind of balance you think you should have. And joining us for this conversation is Jo Stone, the powerhouse behind the Balance Institute. Listeners, Joe's story is a roller coaster of corporate success, personal chaos, and a journey to reclaim joy and clarity. From being Asia Pacific's youngest CMO to almost blowing up our own life in search of happiness, Joe's path led her to redefine balance and help thousands of women do the same. Ready to uncover what's really holding you back? And how perfectionism fuels burnout and the unique self sabotage problems we all have? So, let's explore the tools you need to build a life that's not just successful but truly fulfilling without blowing it all in the process. So, buckle up, listeners. It's going to be an enlightening and empowering ride. So, Joe, welcome to the show, and it is an absolute honor to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Great. So, Joe, your journey started with what seemed like having it all, being the youngest CMO of Asia Pacific, and then family, even triathlons. But you feel burned out. What are the hidden warning signs of burnout that most of us miss or you missed?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it was a roller coaster of a journey. And I think for me, I was very much on the surface, looked like I had it all. I was doing what I thought was, I'm Australian. So, the great Australian dream of I had this corporate job. My objective was to get in the C-suite, as we say. So to have a chief in my title as a chief marketing officer. I had a regional role. And this was at 32. I pretty much ticked all those career boxes. I was on a not-for-profit board. So I was dealing with a lot of pressure. I was, in a big role with big teams. And at the same time, I had quite young children. I have 2 girls. And what I tended to find was I knew I was tired. I knew that I was pushing myself really, really hard because I was really good at that. But this gnawing feeling really almost in my gut or in my soul was saying, there has to be something more than this. Because you've achieved everything that you said you ever wanted. It was meant to feel good when you got here.
Yeah.
And that is one of the real hidden symptoms that we see with many sort of high achieving people, particularly women burning out, is that any wins or successes that you have start to feel empty because they're not actually your real goals. They're goals that you're pursuing perhaps because society said or because your parents said, which just doesn't bring that sense of fulfillment that you're longing.
Right. You answered it beautifully, Joe. Also, I believe, and you also have spoken about this, how perfectionism played a role in your burnout, as we try to perfectly achieve all or, tick mark all the check boxes of achievements conditioned to us. Why do you think high achievers often fall into this trap, and how can they break from it?
Yeah, great question. And perfectionism used to be a badge of honor that I was quite a proud perfectionist. I was known for my standards, high standards at that. And I thought that that was really what was the cornerstone of my reputation. I had a high standard of work. Anything I sent out always looked great. Everything was always formatted. I could spot an errant font across the room. I'd be like, oh, that A is in a different font. So while I thought it was a good thing, anything in too high doses actually can become toxic. And so some of the real pieces that drive perfectionists to burnout are those high ruthless standards. And part of the reason it fuels burnout is because the moment you get close to meeting a standard, you actually move the goalposts. And so you never get that sense of fulfillment. And a perfectionist is always focused on what they've done wrong or what they didn't do, because there's this huge fear of failure, and that's where a lot of the imposter syndrome comes to. So at its core, really, perfectionism is simply fear. And when you are ruled by fear, then it can be very difficult to unlock joy. It's very easy for you to hustle your way, to push your way through everything. And so, no surprise, that's very easily leads to a burnout situation.
Right, right. Makes sense. Um, so now talking about the Balance Institute. So it emphasizes providing tools and strategies for balance and clarity. So could you share any one of, or maybe more than that, transformative tools or practices that listeners can implement right away, particularly in their daily busy schedule?
Yeah, sure. So what I tend to talk about is that, part of the reason that so many high achievers tend to burn out is we're relying on the wrong toolkit. And I say that burnout isn't a sign that you're failing. It's very much a sign that your tools are failing you. So the things that we try to do, like whether it's meditation or thinking, oh, I just need to slow down, when you don't have what I sort of call these 5 steps, it actually becomes really, really difficult for you to do any of it. And so I call this my reset process, which is very much a model that once you understand how to get all these tools in your toolkit, then everything unlocks a lot better. So would you like me to share at a high level what those 5 key components are that you must have in your toolkit?
Yep, please.
Yeah, beautiful. So the first thing that you need to learn to do is to actually recognize your patterns, which is what the R in reset stands for, because we all have our own unique burnout patterns driven by our upbringing, driven by the conditioning that we've been exposed to. And without that self-awareness, you've got zero chance of being able to actually stop living unconsciously and stop the self-sabotage programs and work with your biology rather than against it. So the E there stands for we've got to embody your nervous system regulation. And by this, I mean when we are living unconsciously, we spend our lives also in fight or flight. When we're ruled by fear, when we're ruled by stress, worried about making mistakes. And it makes, we spend a lot of our time and energy actually suppressing those emotions, the guilt, the shame, the disappointment, the resentment. And so we engage in a whole lot of numbing behavior. And is it any wonder then that we can't access joy or we can't access calm because we've never learned how to actually regulate our emotional ecosystem or our nervous system? So once you've done those 2 things, the other tools in your toolkit, you need to learn to sustain your energy. Many high achievers tend to live this life of 2 speeds: warp speed, going crazy 110 kilometers an hour, or they're collapsed on the couch. And so there's a whole lot of hustling. There's a whole lot of reliance on willpower and cortisol and adrenaline. And there's never any chance for recovery. There's never any ability to rest because that to-do list can be so loud in everybody's ears. So learning a more stable way of sustaining that energy balance is really critical to avoiding burnout. Do you want me to keep going with the last 2?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, beautiful. So we've got next 2 is E in reset. And this is a big piece that high achievers can be a big unlock, is you've got to learn to elevate your identity beyond external achievements. What tends to happen is so many of us tend to equate our self-worth and our identity with our career or with our career success, whether that's your qualifications, your job title, your salary. And it means that the moment your work becomes rocky, your sense of self is really, really challenged. And when you add to that, we have so many labels. I'm a mum, I'm a wife, I used to be a chief marketing officer. There's a whole lot of external labels, and we get buried under those. And so until you actually work out who you are on the inside and cultivate an identity that is not tied to external achievements, then you can now start to really build a life that you truly love rather than one that is not focused on who you really are. And then the last piece of this reset framework is the one piece many people are missing. Well, they're missing a lot of these, but is actually being able to take action, which is the T in reset, with practical tools. So many people don't know how to turn their awareness into action because most women I work with, most women and most high achievers typically are quite self-aware because they spend a lot of time critiquing themselves.
Mm.
So they know that they're procrastinating, or they know that they feel guilty, or they know that they're they're not avoiding conflict. They know that they're saying yes when they want to say no. But in that moment, they don't have any tools in their toolkit that are small, that are easily implementable in their life to actually drive that change. So this brings back the feeling of control and allows you to really, live the life that you want and get out of this really crazy vortex of burnout.
Mm. This is a great way to, you know, organize all the different stages step by step. So, if I would like to summarize for our listeners as well. So, reset framework, basically recognizing, then embodying or embracing, then we move towards the sustainability part, and then elevating our identity or kind of discovering our true purpose, or something like trying to identify our values, and finally taking actions. So, uh, do all of these stages go sequentially, or depends on person to person?
Well, the idea is that transformation is not a straight line. And what many people end up bouncing around these, I mean, it would all be nice if you could say they stack, but what tends to happen is that you start to look at your identities. Let's say something happens at work and you get passed over for a promotion, or you wind up in financial difficulty. Often then your identity, say, can be rocked, and that causes you now to go back and look at all of your patterns. And then you might get some tools to finally regulate your nervous system. So these, while it's not necessarily a linear process, these are the pieces that you need to be consciously aware of. What am I doing to regulate my nervous system? What am I doing to build sustainable energy management into my day, rather than just going in hustle mode all day and then collapsing at 10 o'clock at night with nothing left in the tank? So really being aware of all these 5 key areas is a game changer to being able to stay away from burnout and really cultivate this life of balance and that you truly love.
Wow, inspiring, Joe. Wow. So, moving on. So as you mentioned about self-sabotaging, um, so there are some unique self-sabotage programs that hold us back. Um, in your experience, what kind of programs have you seen like this, and how do we begin to recognize and dismantle them?
Yeah, so there's 3 key self-sabotage programs that most of us have, and this is particularly prevalent in women, given this the main group that I work with. I call this the trifecta, or the triple Ps. And so the 3 biggest self-sabotage programs I see are perfectionism, people pleasing, and procrastination. And those 3 typically come together as a one lovely big package and all feed off each other. So there was a laugh there. I'm guessing some of those sound familiar.
Yep, yeah, absolutely, all 3 of them.
Yep. Yeah. So they go a long way to, I mean, most people can recognize that they're perfectionists. Perhaps they're proud of it. Most people know that they're procrastinating, and those 2 always come together. So perfectionists will always procrastinate, because what better way to avoid making a mistake than to never begin? And many women, from a conditioning perspective, and men too, have been raised to not rock the boat, to not step into conflict. Maybe they were the peacemaker in their family. They want to make other people happy. And all 3 of these are very much focused on everybody outside of you. They're about numbing the fear. They're about avoidance. And they really sap a lot of our own sense of self-worth. They make people feel very lost, and they are huge energy drains, because we then have a whole range of compensatory behaviors simply because we don't realize that these programs are running in the background, much like if you had your computer going and there was this crazy thing that was running permanently, taking up so much of your energy and, making you do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do if you could stop them.
Hmm. Oh, makes sense. So how do you help women redefine what having it all means in a way, that aligns with their unique values and goals also?
Yeah, well, what I have found in my experience is that the have it all, I call it the great have it all myth, because they do. There's a lot of famous quotes where they say you can have it all, but you just can't have it all at once. And that's a blatant lie. What you can't have all at once is what society has defined as having it all, which is where you work like you aren't a parent and you parent like you don't work. Well, those two things are mutually exclusive. You can't be all of those things. So when we're expected to be this, badass boss in the boardroom, and then we're meant to be this like super present parent who's baking cookies with our children, and then we're meant to be super healthy and fit and be doing green juices every morning and meditating for an hour, and then we're the perfect daughter, or we're the perfect child to our parents, and then we volunteer in the community. It's just this whole have it all myth has made us striving for something that is not only unobtainable, but in truth, it's not something that many people want. So that was part of my story, is that I was doing what I thought I wanted. And the reason everything felt so empty, I thought I had it all, was because it wasn't the all that I wanted. I was building a life that was very much somebody else's vision of what it should be. And that's the journey that every individual has to go on, is to work out, well, yes, I can have it all, but what does that all mean to me? To some people, that means working full time and having a big job. To other people, that might mean working 4 days a week and spending more time with their kids. But until you're free to work out what really are your sort of soul desires or your heart's desires, it can become really difficult to work out what you're chasing. So you end up just chasing the house or the material success or the title because you think it's what you should want.
Hmm. Interesting. So, Joe, on the flip side, your story involves a lot of significant life changes. Um, sometimes, especially women and high achieving women, we might have second thoughts if we are trying to, or we are kind of we go anxious that am I taking this right decision? Am I taking this right decision to spend my productive time into rethinking into what I should do, or what exactly is my purpose? Do you think making those changes might create even more stress than they currently have?
Well, I guess it depends what's causing the current stress.
Uh,
And so many women have actually are relying too heavily on their logical brains to try to think their way out of situations. And what I heard in your question, which I see everywhere, is, there's this fear of making the wrong decision, waiting for the perfect time, of making a mistake, of having regrets, of needing more information before you can take a step forward. And these are just all coping mechanisms of not really having that reset process in place. Because when you've learned to manage your nervous system and get out of fight or flight, when you're stuck in fight or flight, it's literally biologically like everything looks like a lion. 99% of our brain was actually evolved on the savannah. And so you have to go back to a caveman on the savannah of Africa when you want to learn how your brain actually operates. So it sees everything as a lion. It sees everything as life or death, even though it's an email from your boss or, a meeting. It thinks that it's a lion. And so it has the same response. So you need to learn to regulate that. And what so many people have lost these days we glorify intelligence, we glorify kind of academics, and so many people have actually lost access to their intuition, which is that deep inner knowing, which only comes when you're out of fight or flight and you're much more connected to your emotions. When you have intuition, you're able to make those really big decisions from a place of certainty because you're tapping into additional radio frequencies rather than just your prefrontal cortex, which is your logical, rational brain. And it's almost like you're turning down or not accepting or not giving equal weight to all these other parts of you, these other forms of intelligence. Call it spidey senses, call it gut instinct, call it intuition, whatever you want to call it, that are actually giving us signals every single day about our environment. So we turn them down and we don't harness them and rely on overthinking, more information, and this just leads to paralysis. So I have found, yes, I mean, I've made big decisions. I made a lot of them quite quickly, but that was because I was really connected to who I am. I'm really connected to what it is that I want. And I'm also really connected to my intuition. So when a decision comes up, I'm able to make it. But at the same time, I've done so much work on my perfectionist that if I make the wrong decision, that's okay. Because I always know that I made the best decision that I could at the time. And I can give myself grace if later on more information appears that that wasn't the right decision. Well, I made the best decision I could at the time. I'm able to look back at myself with a lot of compassion and say, okay, I'm smart. Now I get to make another decision. So what now with this extra information is the right decision for me? And when you're able to pivot faster because you're not so afraid of failure, well, then all the pressure comes off and it becomes easier and faster to make decisions. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. That stress of being perfect is really, really is detrimental. It actually leads to mistakes, actually.
It does, because I've had clients who come to me and like, right, Joe, I've got this decision to make. Okay, if scenario A happens, then B, C, D, and then if scenario, and they've literally exhausted themselves going down to, literally the nth degree of this scenario. And then they make a decision. It takes them so long. They've usually missed out on opportunities because of that. They've wasted incredible amounts of energy. And then 6 weeks later, new information comes to hand that they could never, ever, ever have known. And like, oh my God, now I'm back here again. So it's this insane cycle of overthinking, over reliance on knowledge, and it means everything is slow. So everything is heavy, everything is slow instead of being nimble and light.
True, true. Great, Joe. Great. That was really a great explanation. And finally, before we wrap up, achieving balance without sacrifice, it sounds like a dream, especially for women. So, uh, how exactly is this possible? And if we can support it with a real life example.
Yeah. So what I have found is that most women assume that burnout is the price of success, that it's not actually possible to have the life that they want, that they have to pay. And so much of this comes down to their own sense of self-worth, their belief that other people are more important than them, they have to take care of everybody else before them. And all that means is that when you put everybody ahead of yourself, not only does nobody get the best of you, but also it then becomes impossible for you not to sacrifice something, whether it's your health, whether it's your relationships. Usually the thing that most women are sacrificing is their health and also their own mental and emotional health. So there's never any time for themselves. They give everything to everyone and feel constantly depleted. So that is not a way to live life. But unfortunately, it's the story that we've been told is that, so many women live in, grave fear of being selfish.
Mm.
But there is a reason. It's a bit trite, but there's a reason they say put your own oxygen mask on first. And the more women can learn to do that, they start to realize that if they are fueled, if they are breathing, everybody actually gets the best of them. So it's actually selfish not to take care of yourself. Because if you have children, they get a shell of the mother with no patience who yells at the drop of a hat, skips through pages when they're reading a bedtime story and can't wait to get the kids to bed so she can get back on her laptop. That is not the mother that most women want to be, but it's who they have ended up becoming. It's not to make them feel bad, but if they just reverse a lot of the beliefs they have about themselves and how they need to operate, well, then they can have the life that they want and they don't have to sacrifice anything.
True. Lovely, Joe. Lovely. That was such an enlightening conversation with great examples and simple, straightforward explanation. And I'm very confident our listeners have, especially women who are listening to this, they have a lot of great takeaways from this conversation. So, if they wish to connect with you and also explore more about the reset method and your work at the Balance Institute, how they can do that?
Yeah, sure. They can visit us at balanceinstitute.com, or if they want to know more about our toolkit and how we help various women, then on our website, or they can visit balanceinstitute.com/book and book in a discovery session with our team and just find out what it is that we do, how we help women. And if we're in a position to support them in any way, then we'd be delighted to help.
Lovely. We'll have the details mentioned in the show notes for our listeners. And Joel, thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey and also empowering wisdom today. And I think it's crystal clear that achieving true balance isn't doing more, but I believe it's about redefining what matters and finding fulfillment on your own terms. So thank you so much.
And so thank you for having me.
And to our listeners, remember that burnout isn't a badge of honor, as rightly said by Joe. It's a signal for change. So if you are ready to reclaim your energy, clarity, and joy, be sure to connect with Joe and explore the transformative tools at the Balance Institute. Until next time on The Mindful Living, stay curious, stay kind, stay mindful. Thank you.